excellent form right now, because we look at the top of the form table and that's who you find there. City 16 points there from 18 available to them, Spurs 14, Liverpool 13, and in a moment I'm going to assess just who, if anybody, is capable of challenging City next season. But first I'd like to welcome our guest on this day's show, goalkeeper and journalist David Priest, who joins me now from the UK. David, I think you're in London, but we're talking about Manchester City right now. Are they going to turn out firstly to be the most dominant, Invincibles notwithstanding, title winners we've ever seen? And what do you think? 20 plus points in front of at the end of the season?
Yeah, it's very impressive, isn't it? What you're looking at now, hopefully from Manchester City's point of view, is the start of a real dynasty in English football. They certainly have the resources to keep building and keep tweaking and making the team better. And if Pep does exactly what he did last season and identify little weaknesses that they have and correct them, then it's difficult to see beyond them again next season.
How did you feel? OK, Chelsea, I mean, I've drawn a conclusion or two, as you heard me say just now. I wasn't surprised to see what Chelsea did, and part of me thinks, particularly, you know, we're all looking at that clip on Twitter, aren't we, where they just backed off and didn't bother getting after the ball. They held their shape, pattern of play. They must have Barcelona in mind right now, mustn't they?
Certainly, and that's one of the big things that we've noticed this season, that they've struck fear into everyone, into Manchester United, into Chelsea. The two teams that have taken them on, Liverpool and Tottenham, have got differing results. And to be honest, I think that's the only way you can beat them. You have to take that risk that you might get or concede 3 or 4 goals against them if you're going to get those 3 points. It's very difficult to see any team defending for a whole 90 minutes and restricting them. Huddersfield did it quite well for a little while when they played at their place, and Newcastle were criticised for that approach, but they have to see what their sort of aim is, whether it's just a damage limitation or whether actually trying to win these games. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you need a manager who's absolutely secure in his own position. Just a moment, David. I'm going to come back to you on something you said there. We have to consider the possibility as well that City are going to get even better, as you suggested out there. If you go into the win of the league's reigning champions in more detail, you realise that Pep Guardiola's men actually have an awful lot left in the tank right now, especially as Bernardo Silva's coming to the fore. He's scored 5 goals already now in 2018 in all competitions. I also thought that Aymeric Laporte is looking convincing. He actually gained possession of the ball quite often there against, admittedly, a poor Chelsea challenge. So if you take a little look at what they've been doing lately and you just consider their form, OK, I'll show you recent form here, but you could go back an awful long way. In any of these starting 11s here, you've seen them starting without the likes of Stones, Fernandinho, Sterling, Mendy, Delph, Jesus, who just got a few minutes yesterday. I just wonder if they're going to strengthen more. And coming back to you, David, on this one, if they do strengthen, where's an obvious area that they need a second or third option in?
I think that's one of the things we've got to, Manchester City have got to think about. They're strengthening in depth now, and anything that's been changed to that starting 11 you'd think would be tweaks. You look at the left back area, Benjamin Mendy's been out all season. He started very promisingly. He'll certainly come back and strengthen the side. There's maybe some talk about, even though Fernandinho's done very well this season, he's been very impressive, but he's come to an age where he might deteriorate now, so they're looking at possibilities like Fred, maybe bringing him in the summer. And there's always the chat around Aguero now. No matter how many goals Aguero scores and how well he does, he's chipping in with assists this season. We've seen there's always the chat around somebody coming in and being that Guardiola type, somebody who'd be more involved in the build-up play. So there's probably possibly 3 areas, but like I said, the strength and depth they've got now in the centre half, got 4 very good centre halves now. Claudio Bravo's coming in, done very well in when he's come to the cup games in goal. But also you've got Angus Gunn, so there's a decision there to be made whether Angus Gunn's develops more in the Championship or he comes back as a number 2. So it's just you can't see any drop off at all. You can only see him going further forward and strengthening and become more of a force.
It's scary, but let's not be too scared. And before we all give up and stop watching the Premier League entirely for a few seasons, let's just take some encouragement from the fact that there are at least 3 teams who look as if they could respond to City's barnstorming start. These are the points per game stats we've got here. Manchester City are flying at 2.65. Liverpool under Klopp, a really impressive 2.35. Manchester United over 2 and Spurs just under it. Now, of course, for United, really it's incumbent on them to not give up on City. They haven't played yet this match week, and they'll be expected to end it in second place. They'll also be expected to spend far more money as Jose Mourinho continues his own personal duel with Guardiola. But I'm especially interested in what we're seeing from Liverpool and Spurs right now. So let's look at what they did at the weekend. Now, in Liverpool's case, because Jurgen Klopp's getting a tune out of players who weren't exactly expected to be immediate successes at Anfield. I mean, this is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain firing back at the critics, Thierry Henry amongst them. He reminded them of their words about his work in an advanced midfield role, which Klopp has absolutely nailed for him. Elsewhere, Mo Salah, whoever thought he was a flop? But anyway, he continues to be amazing. Karius pulled off a truly stunning save that I'm sure David appreciated at the weekend. And most crucially for me, Liverpool actually easily won a game they were supposed to win at home against a manager bent on frustrating them. So you've got to say, David, in every department, they're coming on very nicely, aren't they, Liverpool?
Yeah, and I think the likes of Oxlade-Chamberlain, his performances lately have been a big plus for them. I think a lot of people thought that it was a big outlay for him. Arsenal were probably very happy with the 30 million they got for him. And Klopp's turned him around. Michael Cox did a very good piece on when he moved there. Sort of going back to his background in private school, he was educated at a school where rugby was predominantly the first sport. And you could see in his play that sort of translated into the way he played when he was a wide player. He kind of moved in these zigzag movements rather than being more direct. Now, what we're seeing now is a player that I saw at 16, 17, 18 years old being a central midfield player and breaking free, breaking forward, being very direct. And once he gets past that first player with his pace, then he opens defences up and causes panic, and he's got lots of options in front of him. So it's been a big plus certainly for Liverpool now, getting to play that way, being more direct.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we extend that rugby analogy, he's straightening his run. He's running good lines, isn't he? And that's what we're liking. Very quickly, I just want to mention Spurs here, David, as well. They also did the job they were expected to at the weekend with the minimum of fuss, the maximum of threat, really, for their Champions League visitors this weekend. Look out, Juve, indeed. Spurs, I should point out, unbeaten in 11 games in the league, 16 in all competitions, and Son Heung-min's on fire, especially at Wembley, where he's had a hand in 13 goals in his last 11 appearances. Just quickly, David, your take on Son, on the options, Moura, of course, Lamela, they're looking the part, aren't they?
They are. They're certainly overperforming when it comes to the outlay that other clubs have made and the financial clout they've got. Young Son, he's certainly overtaken Dele Alli now in importance to the team. You can see that the contribution he can not just with his goals, but his desire to run forward and join in. It was certainly an example in the second goal. He broke his neck to get into the box to get on the end of that cross, and he's become ever more important. The only danger with Spurs now, they've got to go back to White Hart Lane. Will it take them a little bit of adjusting to get back into a new stadium, and like it did with Wembley? And will that cost the result on the title? I think it might just do that.
Yeah, it's a good point, but they won't mind going back to a place they finished at so brilliantly. Stick around, David. We're going to get to a break just now and come back and talk about relegation issues and matters in the Premier League next.
The back end of the Premier League table is one crowded place. When we come back, John is dissecting the weekend's games for the clubs lingering near the dreaded drop zone. For some, it's only goal difference that will make, well, all the difference when it comes to potential relegation. See, we told you it was tight. Plus, don't forget to put your feedback in right now on Facebook Live, because we will be having a mammoth Have Your Say segment coming up later in the show.
Welcome back. Let's just recap the weekend's results in the Premier League before I bring David Priest back in to talk about the bottom of the table this time around. Well, obviously, there we are, the results. And on Friday, as well as highlighting the tabletop clashes, I pointed out the significance in particular of that Southampton-Stoke game and the Swansea-West Ham encounter. One produced a stalemate that was probably only partially satisfying for both teams points-wise, while in Wales, of course, Swansea thumped the hapless Hammers 4-1. That thrashing, now, if we take a little look at the table, meant that they actually moved above them. So we'll get to the bottom of that table here. And that could be crucial. Goal difference, a 4-1 defeat for West Ham, and they slipped below there, Carlos Carvajal's side. And the other thing as well that's worth pointing out here is the remarkable form that has been shown by them. Because we're not in the bottom half of the table anymore. We're up in 4th place in the form table. What a time to find your best form of the season. 13 points taken from 18 available to them over the last 6 games. And it's worth also highlighting that Brighton are up there in outstanding form as well. 11 for them. And I think in terms of the league table, they're probably, 1 win from safety right now. But other teams have been drifting alarmingly in terms of the form. Let's go and have a little look at the bottom of it right now, because unsurprisingly, West Brom down there, rock bottom with just a point from their last 6 and very little going further back there. Crystal Palace above them with 2 from 15 as they head into that game, which looks like a tall order against Manchester United. Above them, though, West Ham after their shocker at Swansea. And let's pick up on that right now. Now, the papers savaged them. Manager Moyes admitting that he's worried about his team, and Carvajal, incidentally, the other part of the headline there, was talking about his admiration for Sheffield-based indie rock bands, as you do. But the last part of that actually was referring to Andre Ayew, who was outstanding against his former club. So let's have a little look, shall we, about Swansea now. His showing alone, I suppose, allied to their strong home form, leaves me pretty bullish about the prospects of a club that really has got itself into a very good place indeed. As far as the 2 sets of fans are concerned here, Swansea's and West Ham's, I know who the happier were. David, give us your take on Swansea City and what Carvajal, who's a bit of a character, has done to galvanise that club.
Yeah, I watched them against Newcastle just as Carvalho took over, and you could see that they didn't look like a side that were suffering from any kind of confidence crisis. They lacked the cutting edge, certainly. They lacked the quality up front, but overall they didn't look like a team that was struggling at all. And I think that's the key when you look at all these sides that are probably within that relegation battle. The teams, the likes of Watford, the likes of Bournemouth, Brighton, and Swansea. They are still playing good football. They still are looking resilient, and they've got some fight in them. When you look at compared to other sides, like Southampton, Palace, you really feel for them, because that's the very sort of base that you want, is that teams are still fighting for it.
That's the one, and playing a bit of football and expressing themselves. Now, as I said just now, and I'll go back to that league table in a moment, you can't pass judgment entirely on Palace without knowing how they fare against United, but it is undeniable to point out that their form really has been absolutely rubbish lately, and that was after it looked as if things were turning around. Now, Roy Hodgson, their manager, is one of a number of tried and trusted British managers whose methods don't really appear to be working right now. So turning from their form to their fixtures, they suddenly find themselves, of course, looking at something that is somewhat challenging. Manchester United later on, Chelsea and Liverpool to come. This month is absolutely hellish for them. As far as those managers are concerned, well, Alan Pardew, English, having an absolutely calamitous time at the very bottom with West Brom. And it's hardly been plain sailing for Sam Allardyce of late either, because he finds himself with Everton in the wrong place entirely. Those travelling Everton fans trained their frustration on Big Sam during and after the defeat at Turf Moor. And you can see why, because back we go to the table where they've slipped now down into 11th place. Adrift, that was what he was talking about, and adrift is a dangerous thing in football, and even if the Toffees maybe have done enough already to mean they don't drift out of this league this season, it could be fatal for them to continue to spiral downwards towards the season's end. Amongst other matters, I think their slump is harming the World Cup prospects of individuals like goalkeeper Jordan Pickford, David, and you'll be keeping a close eye on his form. He's got a lot of work to do. He's had a lot of work to do all season, but the overall sense of a malaise at that club can't be helping.
I think it's a big worry defensively for Everton, and certainly for Sam Allardyce. That's his strength when he goes into clubs. He simplifies what they have to do defensively and makes them more solid. Seeing that when he came to Sunderland and turned things around. and that's the big worry for them. Michael Keane and Ashley Williams and Saturday were just all at sea, and that will be what's worrying them the most. At the start of the season, it was all about the strikers and attacking midfielders, but that's not what's costing them now. It's definitely defensively, and like I said, Jordan Pickford's the one who's going to be he's the busier of all the players in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just go back to that. And on the goalkeeper front, one of his rivals for that England #1 jersey, Jack Butland, actually pulled off 6 saves as Stoke grabbed that, let's face it, attritional point against Southampton. And it's interesting, this one, if we take a little look at what's happening with Stoke, because the Potters are in serious trouble. The league table just showed us that. But in one of the more unlikely sights and stories of the weekend, it's a smiling Paul Lambert, saying that he's been both orchestrating fan chants and also insisting that he's loving the pressure of a relegation battle. Now, I've worked with Paul. His public image has always been on the dour side, but that's not entirely representative of the man himself. Let's have a little look at this table, shall we, and see what they've got to come here, because the key for them is going to be carrying a bit of form into some admittedly really, really tough fixtures. City, wow, okay. That needs a lot of belief if City are up next. But there's also Spurs and Arsenal and some tough games to come there. I just wonder, David, on Stoke's front, I mean, the other day I stood here and I didn't forecast them to go down. I had them getting out of it and Palace going in. Do you see enough about Stoke to see them survive?
Possibly, but they had the defensive problems at the start of the season that cost them a lot of points. They had a lot of injuries. But you're right saying about Paul Lambert. Now, if there's one thing that Paul Lambert is good at, and you ask anybody who's played under him, he's very good at making players feel very good about themselves when they go out on the pitch, and he's very good for team morale and confidence. If there's one thing that he will do, he'll make sure teams go out there feeling the best. And you're right, it's maybe opposite to what people's perception of him is, but like I said, ask anybody, and he's very good. He's a very much of a players manager.
Yeah, absolutely. David, look, thanks very much for finding time for a chat with us today. As ever, it's flown by, but we'll catch up with you again very soon.
Cheers, thanks a lot.
So as David leaves us, I can tell you that Yvette will return to the big screen very shortly, because it's your turn next, and she's going to work her way through all of your feedback. So if you haven't got it in already, get it into us.
Up next, there's good news and bad news. The good news is it's all about you. We want to hear your thoughts on Man City's dominance and who you think could pose a serious threat to the citizens come next season. But the bad news is we could be bringing up terrible things about your club depending on how they performed on the weekend. It's not too late to send us your opinions.
Welcome back. So plenty of food for thought, I'd like to hope, given all we've done so far on the show. And Yvette's been waiting very patiently. So we've got tons of feedback in. Where are we starting?
OK, let's jump straight to Imran Fariz, who says Spurs regulars Wanyama and Rose can't even get into the starting 11 this season. That shows the strength in depth Pochettino has brought to the team this season. Son usually pops up when Kane doesn't.
Yeah, wasn't he brilliant? And that's the thing, isn't it? If you think about it, Spurs are really defying all of the preconceived ideas we have. They're a Harry Kane team. Who might have said that? And then suddenly, of course, they're finding a way. It's not just that. Lucas Moura, Lamela offering options as well. But Son has been superb so far. And then this talk about the squad being too thin. Well, I think we're seeing that they're getting by without real regulars in their team, particularly defensive stalwarts. So, yeah, there's a lot to admire about what's going on there. And even David was saying, well, maybe the relocation position's a problem. But no, they look as if they're travelling well right now. What about the challengers to City?
Yeah, let's take a look at the contenders. We've got Al Song here who says Pep will surely improve on his team next season so that he can win all trophies available in a season. And let's go down to Yap who says challengers to Man City in 2018-2019 got to be Manchester United if Jose has any pride, and Liverpool if they continue to play the way that they are now.
Yeah, I mean, but we'll get a few more up for you there. But obviously what's interesting is you've got someone saying that City will continue to improve, but someone straight away saying Manchester United.
Yes.
Because it was always going to be that, wasn't it?
Yeah, and of course Man U had, you know, the record for the amount of points. Of
course, so there's that rivalry. But I said earlier on, it's not just about United, it's going to be Liverpool, it's going to be Spurs, and certainly look at Martin talking about Liverpool.
Yeah, he says they will be the strongest challenger to Man City next season, followed by Man United. It will not be a stroll for City next season, but teams, especially the so-called top 6 teams, should not be so negative, pay too much respect when playing Man City.
Yeah, at the top you can see there's another one there who's that Super Dip saying the same thing.
He says Liverpool can give a fight for the league next season. You know, and you agree with that too, don't you?
I do agree with it. What's really interesting is you have to look at these comments from people, and obviously you're going to get the rivalries. So the minute you say something about United, then Liverpool are going to chirp up. The minute you say something about Liverpool, Manchester United are going to chirp up. But that's the beauty of this, because they are actually, funnily enough, united in the need to chase down Manchester City. It's not going to happen this season, but I, for one, am delighted that those two rivals are playing each other this coming weekend, because otherwise it's got a little bit predictable at the top of the table, hasn't it?
Yeah, let's talk about Arsenal. We've got Jerome here who says Arsenal 5 points behind Chelsea and also 5 points ahead of Burnley. I think they should start to be worried of Burnley catching them.
And remember, Burnley themselves just coming off the back of a really poor run, but they turned it around. And you know, the thing about Arsenal, and this is a problem, I talked about it being predictable at the top of the table. Unfortunately, there's a depressingly familiar feel to the way that they're just imploding right now. Yvette, the biggest problem with Arsenal is, have they bottomed out just yet? How low can they go? Europe next, of course.
That is the big question. Well, speaking of going to the bottom of the table, we've got Noor Azizi here who says Alan Pardew and Sam Allardyce used to work their magic touches for relegation-bound teams. This season has been a bit tough, especially for Pardew.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And there's another talking point for another day here. Those English managers that we feted and said would be really great, well, they haven't really worked out, have they? Yvette, thanks for putting all that lot together. I know you had a lot of waiting to do, but it was worth it. And thank you very much for getting all those comments in, as ever. Hope you enjoyed the show. So much more to come this week. Champions League's on its way. Talk soon.